It is hot take city in college football right now after a crazy weekend of college football this last weekend. Georgia destroys Vanderbilt 55-0. But the big game, of course, all eyes are in Knoxville. Tennessee knocks off Alabama. And at the end of the game, and of course now we've got analysts all over the country saying, you know what? I think the Tennessee Volunteers should be number one. And the first guy who I saw said that was David Pollack, former Georgia Bulldog legend, All-American, works for ESPN right now, does College Game Day, does a lot of different things. And he tweeted the other day, I don't know how Tennessee football would not be number one in the country this week. Best win of the season was last night. I disagree there, but let's get into it, right? Because he's not the only one who said that. Chris Doering over on SEC Network, he's a Florida guy. He said Tennessee is the number one team in the country. And that got me thinking, what is this based on? Is this based on the best resume, which would make sense? I get that. Or is this based on the eye test? It shouldn't be based on the eye test because you're obviously closing your eyes when Tennessee is on defense. I got the numbers. I thought I had the numbers right here. I'm going to look them up real quick. But Tennessee, in case y'all haven't noticed, they can't play defense. They can't play defense at all, really. I got them right here. Okay, Tennessee's defense has given up this year. Against Alabama, they gave up 49 points, 569 total yards, 455 passing yards, 114 yards rushing. Could not stop Alabama. Against Pittsburgh, a team that's not ranked, I think when they did beat Pittsburgh, they were number 17, but they gave up 27 points, 415 total yards, 141 rushing yards. On the road, beat Pittsburgh in overtime. At the time, you're thinking, okay, that's a nice little win. Until Pittsburgh lost to Georgia Tech. Now, that win is null and void. That's about as good as a win as Georgia's was against Missouri. And I think a lot of people remember that game because it was just a couple weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago now. But Georgia had to escape that one. Ohio State, I don't know if they had to escape Notre Dame, but Notre Dame is bad, and Ohio State played around with them. Their biggest win is against Toledo. I don't want to talk about the Buckeyes being number one. I can understand Tennessee, but again, their defense is bad against the Gators, a bad Gator team. Florida is not good. They are a bad football team this year. Tennessee gave up 33 points to the Gators, 594 total yards, 453 passing yards to a guy who can barely throw the football. Anthony Richardson is a really good athlete. Half the time he throws the football, he doesn't know where it's going. He's completing like 56% of his passes, I think. The guy can't play quarterback, yet he threw for 453 against Tennessee. The Gators also rushed for 141 again. So you can run on Tennessee. You can pass on Tennessee. You can score on Tennessee. So when people say Tennessee should be number one, they're just thinking about that Alabama game. And let's be real for a second. Alabama gave that game away just as much as Tennessee won. Tennessee deserves credit. They beat an Alabama team that has taken a step backwards. This is not the same Alabama team we saw last year. It's not the same Alabama team we saw in 2020 or before that. This is a team that is not disciplined. They're not as talented. They're not playing with a lot of chemistry, and they're not great at playing on the road. They had to escape Texas A&M, and of course they did lose to Tennessee. If Jahmyr Gibbs catches that pass out of the backfield on the last possession, they have a great chance of winning the game. They should have won the game anyway. They should have kicked the field goal and won the game. But if Jahmyr Gibbs catches that pass on the last possession, they have a much easier field goal. They could run the timeout a little bit more. Game should have been over. They handed Tennessee the game with less than a minute. Of course, Hendon Hooker made the throws, and their kicker made the kick on that little flounder of a kick that barely made across the goal line. Anyway, if this were Alabama 2 years ago or even last year, yes, it'd be a solid win. And it is. But let's not pretend Alabama is still the same Alabama. So when people say that was the biggest win of the season, no, it's not. Georgia beat Oregon by 46 points. Oregon was number 11, I think, at the beginning of the season. They're number 10 right now. Georgia beat number 10 Oregon by 46 points. It was a bloodbath. It wasn't even close. There's no way that Tennessee's win over Alabama by 3 points at home against an Alabama team that didn't play well and committed penalties all game long was better than Georgia's win. They beat Florida, who was ranked. Florida is a bad team, but Tennessee beat them when they were ranked. LSU, is not good. LSU is not a good football team. They happened to be ranked when Tennessee went on the road and beat them. That was a quality win, for sure. But you can't have a team number one in the country when they're giving up yards at will and they're letting teams score 33, 49. Listen, they beat a Cupcake Ball State team and they had another cupcake. I think they have one this weekend. But let's look at Georgia's schedule right now, or their resume. Because again, Tennessee's is really not that impressive to me when you look over it. I get they're the cute little story of college football right now. And I get why everyone's jumping on the bandwagon a week after they beat Alabama. I get it. Georgia beat number 10 Oregon right now, 49-3. They shut out Samford. They blew the doors open on the road at South Carolina. Won that game by 41 points. Could have been worse. Messed around with Kent State a little bit. Still put up 39. Just a game that they just didn't seem like they were mentally prepared for. Kind of sleepwalked through it. Gets Missouri. They escaped. Should have played better. And they have played better than the last 2 weeks. Blew out Auburn. Ran all over them. They won the game by 32 points. And then you shut out Vanderbilt 55-0. They're playing really well. Georgia deserves to be the number one team in the country. But I do think it's funny how everyone is jumping on the Tennessee bandwagon right now. And Tennessee's number 3, and I think that's a solid place for them. You can't make the case for them being number 1 the way their defense is playing. If we're talking about the most complete team in the country, it is Georgia 100%. Offense, defense, special teams. Nobody plays those 3 better right now than Georgia. Ohio State, we'll see how good they are against an Iowa team this weekend that can't score. They're 6-0. They look good. I guess you could continue to put them at number 2, but they haven't beaten anyone. They don't have a lot of really impressive wins. Tennessee at number 3, kind of where they deserve. Michigan 7-0. Are they the same Michigan team, or are they actually a tough physical team who can play with the big boys in the SEC? I'm still not sure, but they're playing really well. Solid win against Penn State, a team that's not as bad as they usually are. So they're at number 4. I like it. Clemson, I think, is barely beat Florida State. They won that game by 6-7 points last week. And Florida State stinks. They stink. I know they have good quarterback play. They're still the Seminoles. They stink. They still need to get a lot better. Clemson kind of slid by them, but we'll see how good they are against Syracuse. They're 7-0 in the ACC, so not super impressive. Cool. You beat Wake Forest. Cool. You beat NC State. You beat Florida State. Let's beat some big boys now. Number 5, right outside of that top 4. I think that's probably where they should be. Alabama, number 6. We'll see if they have any trouble with Mississippi State. Would not surprise me because, again, this is not the same Alabama team we're used to. Great win, Tennessee, but you caught Alabama at the right time at home, and they kind of helped you win the game. I mean, we're just being honest here. Ole Miss at number 7. Their defense has got to get a lot better. I like the Horned Frogs at TCU. Do they beat Kansas State? I'm not so sure. They're ready for a loss. They can only play good football for so many weeks in a row. Eventually, all those teams fall to a couple teams, in the Big 12 over there. Kansas State, it's a team I can definitely see knocking off TCU. UCLA, a team I've been riding all season long. They've got Oregon this week, number 9, number 10. There are just not a lot of great teams in college football right now. You might have one, and it might be Georgia. Is Ohio State a great team? Hey, we're going to have to find out over the next several weeks. Tennessee's not a great team. They're too inconsistent on defense. They're giving up way too much in the air, on the ground, total yards, points. They're not a great team. They're a good team. They're not number 1. Georgia's number 1. They have the best defense in the country. I think total defense, if you look at the numbers, I think it's like Illinois, Boise State, then Georgia. So it's Georgia. Not a lot of teams are scoring on Georgia. Tennessee is going to test Georgia's defense. But again, if we're talking the most complete team, top to bottom, depth, offense, defense, special teams, coaching, quarterback play, Georgia's number 1. I get what David Pollack is trying to say, and Chris Doering and all these other analysts are out there trying to give Tennessee the number 1 ranking. You can't do it the way their defense is playing. They just gave up 49 points at home, and it should have been worse if Alabama was competent at the end of the game. Didn't happen. I'm not on board with Tennessee being number 1, obviously, because they shouldn't be number 1. Georgia's the number 1 team in the country. and they're the most complete team. And there's going to be a big time top 3 showdown in Athens coming up. I think Tennessee has Kentucky in 2 weeks, though. Might have looked at that schedule wrong. Actually, let's look right here. LSU, Alabama, UT Martin. Yep, they have Kentucky October 29th. If they get by the Cats, then they come to Athens undefeated. One of the biggest games in Sanford Stadium history. But they're not going to be number 1 going into that game because the Dogs are going to be number 1. They're going to beat Florida. They're going to bash them in. And then we get that top 3 matchup in the Classic City. So what do you think? Should Tennessee be number 3? Should they be number 2? Should they be farther down the list? We know Georgia's number 1. I want to hear about your top 10. Shoot it at me in the comment section. Guys, thanks for watching this video. As always, stay tuned to the next one coming up right now, and I'll see you over on Dog Post.